we have to take a decision. If Parliament can't, and we've seen last night it can't, then we should be prepared to trust people to have the final say on Brexit.
I think people haven't got the stomach in the nation for the idea of a long referendum, the idea of going through what we went before with arguing and rowing and backward and forward. And let's be honest, there'd be rows over even what the question was, wouldn't there? Is there any way that you see that it could be quick?
I think it would take 6 months to do a referendum. There's no easy routes through Brexit now. That's just a feature of where we're at, and I think we need to confront that and take some decisions. But I think you can have a better run referendum. I think how it's conducted is a matter for the politicians and people involved in it. We can run it better. But I do think that clearly we have to take some decisions, and we've seen Parliament go round in circles for nearly 3 years. We still haven't reached a consensus, and we have to confront the fact that maybe we're never going to do that. But actually, it may be the best for people themselves to now say what they actually want, knowing what we know now about the challenges with Brexit and the options that are on the table.
Undoubtedly, John, the landscape now is a lot clearer in terms of what Brexit might look like. It's very confusing, but understanding, rather than back when we made that decision all those years ago to be in or out, you are somebody on the Labour side of things who has made a decision, and you have made that decision to back Theresa May's deal. Why have you been able to make that decision, and how do you persuade some of your colleagues on those backbenches, or the Labour backbenches, to make that decision as well? Can you find a way through? Because as Justine just said, it is gridlocked. There just seems to be no way through at the moment.
It is gridlocked, and it's gridlocked because there's no majority. That sounds obvious, but I think quite a few in Parliament haven't quite realised that over the last 6 months, that there isn't a majority. I mean, the advantage of Theresa May's deal, interestingly, is it's the one in the middle. It's a compromise, but it sits in the middle.
So it delivers a little bit to everybody.
And therefore nobody, I'm sure Theresa May would say this is the best deal. I say nobody, not many would say this is the perfect deal. Most people have a version that would improve it somewhat. But it's a compromise. But it's a compromise that sits in the middle. And I think the one thing that's come out of yesterday, and I've been saying this I've said it on your show before. In my view, the real choice, the honest choice, is you either have a referendum, and some people like Justine have repeatedly, consistently argued for that. I totally disagree, but they've argued for that. That's a clear choice. Or you have this kind of deal going through. That, to me, has always been the real option, and that has not been obvious to most MPs.
OK.
I think this morning that's somewhat more obvious than it has been before.
So if it is obvious that that's the way through, and you know, both main parties say that they support it, not the Lib Dems, both say they support the idea of Brexit, it was in their manifesto to deliver on it, why is Labour in the majority not voting for it? Because what it looks like is they're doing it for political gain for themselves.
Which is a risk. And Labour's dilemma...
What do you mean it's a risk? Do you think that's what the Labour Party is doing?
It's a political risk. Labour's dilemma is going to come into very sharp focus, because if we try and in some way fudge things in any way and don't get out in the next 2 weeks, then there'll have to be European elections. And these elections, which, to be honest, no one's ever really cared about over the last 30, 40 years in Britain. Suddenly everyone will care about them because we'll be participating.
But just to be clear then, you think the Labour Party are continually voting against the deal, not because they think it'll be better for the Labour Party, not because they think it's better for the country?
I know what everyone says in private, and it's, I can't vote for a Tory deal. Well, the Labour deal didn't get that many votes. I actually voted for it last night, but I think 10 or 11 didn't. The Labour chair didn't vote the Labour line last night. So the country's divided, the parties are divided. There's kind of crudely a north-south, certainly a London and north split on it. And I think that the choices are now simple. You're either going to have to go in Parliament for the referendum and give it back to the people, or you're going to have to go for this deal. That is becoming the choice. Now, whether that everyone kind of grasps that this week, or whether it takes another 10 days, I don't know. But that has become much more clear, I think. And that will resolve one way or other.
Okay. So
People
Justine,
will move one way or other.
Do you
I
feel
think,
there's
on
been that shift now, that John feels finally it's a bit clearer, it is the deal or it's a second referendum? That there's nothing in between, because actually the in-between is too grey?
It does feel like this indicative votes process has given us some evidence of where the weight of opinion in Parliament lies in a way that we just didn't have yesterday. There have been some people talking about a common market model, and it turns out there was very little support for that, actually. So it may be that the route through for the Prime Minister is to say, fine, vote for my deal, but I'm prepared to allow people to have the final say in a confirmatory referendum about whether they agree with it too. For me, that would be...
So that could be her way of breaking it, could it? Because at the moment, because of the DUP saying that they can't stomach the idea of voting for it because of the risk to... where the border would then have to be positioned, the backstop and all of that. Because they said no to that, she can't rely on their votes at this point. Do you think if she then went to Labour MPs and said, OK, you can have your second referendum, that would be a way of her getting it across?
I think it would be, and I've always been clear that my sense is her deal's a bad one. That's my view. That's actually most people in my community's view. But I accept that actually, if more broadly people in Britain want it, then they should have that. I've always said that about leaving on WTO rules. I think the problem is we don't really know actually what people want. That's partly because we had a referendum about whether we stayed or left, but leaving wasn't clear. And we spent the last 3 years trying to debate what leaving really means. We haven't reached a conclusion on that. We've not done it in Parliament, and it's now time to clarify this, because we really could spend a lot more time in Britain arguing about this debate. We now need to finish it, make a decision,
but
and
surely
get
we'll
on
go on
it.
April the 12th.
The rest of the issues in
That's
Britain.
what will persuade Labour MPs.
Do you think Theresa May
Labour MPs are not going to say, we'll vote for the deal because it adds a referendum. That is the referendum position. That's the absolute alternative. What will persuade some more Labour MPs is you're either going to have a referendum and go through it all again. And we're arguing, I'm arguing, and I'm certainly not the only one, lots arguing and saying, will a referendum actually resolve matters? Won't it be pretty much 50-50? Whatever the result is, does that resolve it? No, it doesn't in our view. Therefore, we have more turmoil, and we haven't respected the first referendum. And in areas like mine, the voters will simply walk away. They'll say, we're never going to bother voting in anything again.
It's going to ruin their faith in democracy.
You know, we had a vote, and you've just ignored us.
Would more Labour MPs vote for the deal off the back of Theresa May saying she'll stand down if it goes through? Is that because by doing that, it would feel like they are voting for another Tory leader? Is there any sort of incentive? And it's interesting, Justine, whether that made any difference in the House.
On the Labour side, on the Labour side, it makes no difference, because as people think about it, we all knew she was going to be leaving at some stage. Almost certainly she'd be booted out in November when they could have thrown her out again. So that was going down. Side. On the Labour side, that makes no difference. I think on the Conservative side, it's certainly shifted. People have told me, Tory MPs have told me, it shifted their vote. No, that they've changed their vote.
Because of that?
Boris Johnson's one, who's changed his vote, clearly because of that.
Well, Jacob Rees-Mogg said he would, but then the DUP said that they couldn't support it, so he changed his mind again. I mean, that's one of the issues, isn't it, Justine, that everybody seems to be playing, and you look at the newspapers, playing for their jobs rather than playing for the country.
Yeah, which is totally wrong. And from my perspective, I've always felt Brexit's above party politics. And that's how we'll find a route through, is people actually putting the country first. I recognise some of my colleagues will change their mind. Maybe they'll change it back again. My point's always been, if they can do that, why can't the British people decide to have a vote now?
But everyone thinks they're putting the country first.
Yes, it's just for different reasons.
There's no MP going in there saying, I think I won't put the country first. Well, no, there's virtually no MP.
It feels like there's one or two that are thinking about getting in their next job and manoeuvring from them. That's the problem.
There may be one or two on the Labour side, there may be one or two on the Tory side thinking that, but the vast majority of MPs are not thinking other than what is the right thing to be doing
for the country.
But they're reaching different conclusions.
And I think the problem's been that from the word go, the deal that's been proposed is one that's been unpopular. So wherever you are as an MP, people have been right.
But to be
popular,
fair, though, the
Very
other
unpopular in
options
my
weren't as popular either in many cases,
What
were
about
they?
the idea of a
that's the
general
problem.
election? We were talking earlier, and we had Andrew Piers and Kevin Maguire here, but politics obviously is what they do, and they both feel like there is a general election potentially coming along the line. Whether there's the appetite for that in the British public, we're not sure. Does it feel like that could be where we might be?
Well, the interesting thing on general election is that the two sides of the argument have got a vested interest only having a general election. I don't mean the parties here, if they've got their way forward. So if those who want a referendum could get an extension and could legislate and get a 2-year extension to allow a referendum, then they're going to be much more relaxed about a general election, but they're going to be totally hostile to a no-deal general election. In other words, we have a general election, which means we've actually gone out with no deal.
Which is
they
the
may
case
well
at the
veto
moment.
that.
It's going to happen on April the 12th.
So general election's certainly not. There is potentially, it only needs a third of MPs to veto a general election. The third on both sides, the ultra-Leave side and the ultra-Remain side, could choose to veto a general election precisely because it's the general election on the wrong terms.
But let's be clear, whatever form of a public vote you have, if it doesn't allow us to answer the question on Brexit, then it's not fixing anything.
Which is precisely why it looks an easy option, but it's not nearly as easy. And if you talk privately, there's virtually no MP who thinks a general election is a way forward that's going to solve anything.